and welcome to today's A-Team Group webinar on best practices for creating an effective data quality control framework. My name is Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor here at A-Team Group, and I'll moderate today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Stuart Fleming, Data Quality Manager at Lloyds Bank, Mohib Khurram, Data Quality Engineer at Lombard Odier Investment Manager, and Alexandra Collins, Product Owner at Daydactics. I'll ask them all to introduce themselves in just a moment, but first some hints and tips to make best use of the webinar. To the right of your video screen, you'll see a Slido panel. There are two sections, one for poll questions, and we'll be asking 3 questions today. I'll let you know when they're coming back, so do please vote so that we can gauge industry opinion. And the other section is for your questions to our speakers. So please put those up just whenever you'd like to. We're going to answer them through the webinar so that we can answer as many without them all dropping off the end. So look forward to hearing all your thoughts during the polls and to hearing your questions. So enough of me, and let me ask our speakers to introduce themselves. Stuart, coming to you first. Please tell us a little bit about your interest here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stuart Fleming. I work for Lloyds Banking Group. I've worked for the group for some 17 years as of last weekend, I think. Worked in various roles, mortgage credit risk for quite a while, but moved into data quality over the last 5 years or so. And I'm just really interested to hear what people think of the importance of data quality and data quality frameworks.
Thank you very much indeed. Mohib, coming to you.
Yep. Hi, everyone. This is Mohib. I'm a data quality engineer, and I bring together about a decades-long experience of both buy and sell side of implementing data quality frameworks and data governance platforms. My particular area of interest is the challenges that enterprises face in implementing something like that. So look forward to hearing thoughts on that.
Thank you. And Alexandra.
Hi, so I'm Alexandra from Daydactics. I am product owner, and I've worked on building data quality tools for financial and government institutions. So yeah, as Shirley had said, it'll be interesting to hear other people's thoughts on data quality within their businesses and what tools they're applying and what issues they're seeing in that area.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much indeed. And let's start with a poll question and see how people are getting on with data quality. It is always an issue, but some may be getting on better than others. So the question is, to what extent has your organization achieved data quality? And while you answer the question, let me come first to Stuart to set the scene and tell us how he sees the status of data quality across financial institutions.
I think certainly from a personal experience point of view, there is an increased awareness of data quality and the importance of it, certainly over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. But there is room for improvement. I think we are collecting so much more data than 5, 10 years ago because there's so much more data available. And the more data you've got, the better you can make your business decisions. But with the additional data, it becomes, you really need the data quality framework to be important. So I think that is becoming more of a focus, certainly over the last few years.
Okay, thank you. Mohib, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question. It's hard to find good quality data to talk about the data quality landscape in financial institutions because data quality is such a vast area and so many dimensions to it. But as Stuart pointed out, we have anecdotal evidence of people becoming more open to the idea of good quality data and more statements coming out where senior management are claiming data to be one of their key assets, and then realizing that data needs to be of good quality for it to be an asset. And then we have the regulatory landscape shifting, where in the past decade, the regulators are expecting a lot better quality data from firms. So I think definitely, yeah, there is a shift towards the positive direction, but do feel that more needs to be done in this space.
Okay, that's great. Please may we see the poll results, and Stuart, perhaps you'd like to comment on these. Oh, Stuart, over to you on that.
I'm not overly surprised by that. As Mohib said, I think it's only in the last sort of few years that institutions are realizing that data is an asset in itself. Quite often it's been a bit of a means to an end. But, as Mohib said, the regulatory impetus has changed. So institutions are certainly required to produce higher quality outputs, which require the higher quality inputs of the data. But I'd expect that to change, certainly moving to a good extent, being better than 12%, hopefully, over the next few years.
Excellent, thank you. And as Mohib said, to the greatest extent possible is probably not possible, at least certainly not in the way we're looking at things in today's data environment. Thank you for voting. And coming back to you, Mohib, how do you see the ongoing challenges of achieving data quality?
I think if you look at the past decades, a lot of financial institutions have grown organically, and that's been a very cost-effective strategy. But what that has left is a mess of data architecture in many firms with legacy systems and modern systems. And then when you embark on a data quality journey, you come across this brick wall of complicated architecture that needs to be revamped. And that's becoming a big blocker for a lot of firms to implement something like that. And these programs take a while. So that's like one challenge that firms have to think about. The second thing is, as Stuart mentioned, was we have a lot more data. So big data is no longer an academic concept. It's something that the financial institutions are living and breathing. The 3 V's of big data, so velocity, variety, and volume, are there. And that data requires us to work on data quality in a more sophisticated manner. So, for example, your sample-based techniques might not work anymore on data sets that are orders of magnitude of millions. And then finally, I think you're looking at data quality programs still being considered as part of cost functions. So you always come to that bottleneck of funding for the particular program. And that's been a key issue for many cost functions, but I think it's an onus is on the data quality program leads to kind of show the business benefits, to say, okay, this is more than just a compliance tick box exercise. This is real benefits for my organization, and then overcome that funding challenge.
Okay, thank you. Stuart, what's your experience here in terms of why it's difficult to get it right?
Yeah, certainly back up Mohib's comments on the legacy systems. As institutions have grown and taken over or merged with institutions that are on a completely different kind of systems and applications, and trying to find kind of a one size fits all is very difficult. And I think certainly the resource is sometimes difficult to find. This is kind of an additional thing that institutions are trying to do in terms of the normal day job of the bank. So it requires a really joined up approach and senior management buy-in to provide the resource to get these sort of things implemented, which is a challenge.
Right. Okay. Let's run an audience poll here and see what people are feeling about what the drivers of change are. Obviously, we've mentioned a few of the challenges there. So let's run an audience poll if we may. And it asks, what are the drivers of change behind data quality at your organization? There are quite a number of options, and you can tick as many of the options as are appropriate to your organization. And while you do that, let me come back to Mohib to talk about the drivers of change in terms of data quality.
Mm-hmm. So I think we touched on the regulatory landscape. So it's a very clear stance by FCA and other regulators that they expect and mandate a better data quality in the submissions that firms have. And that's becoming quite challenging for a lot of firms as the regulatory demands have increased. So that's one important driver of change. I think technology is a key driver, and I think it impacts this landscape in different ways. So one is we've been starting to use data more in our decision making. A lot of firms are testing artificial intelligence and machine learning models and autonomous systems to come up with automated insights, but that is only as good as the data that's going into those algorithms. And they're realizing to the need that we need to have better data to be able to make any sense of what's coming out of these algorithms. But technology is also helping as an enabler because we are now able to test and check for data quality large data sets. So when I started in this space about 10 years ago, and I remember doing this on a spreadsheet, it was quite painful to say the least. But now we have tools that are scalable, that are cloud-based, which is helping us to check for quality in places we never thought we could before.
Okay, great. Alexandra, when you're out and about talking to clients and your colleagues, where do you find people wanting to drive change in data quality?
So I think, yeah, it's similar to what Mahib has been saying. So of course we have more customers that now have more pressure to meet these data quality regulations. And of course, this becomes a lot more difficult with the volume of data being captured, just vastly growing across these organizations. And when manual efforts are put in place to try and improve this data quality, sometimes it's just not feasible with the size of the data that the organization is working with at the minute, especially if it's things like alternative data, unstructured data that can sometimes be a bit more difficult to work with. Then we have, of course, the work stream. The organizations are then suffering consequences further downstream, since the quality of the data that they're actually using and analyzing is still poor. So they can't, the business areas that are improving the quality of the data, they just can't keep up with the volume of data being processed by the use of these manual means such as spreadsheets. So yeah, in order for the quality of data this size to be improved, organizations have needed to research and invest in more automated data quality checks. But then, of course, this leads on to the technology used for these automated processes. So it's difficult to find people within or outside the organization that have the required skill sets to implement and maintain these automated data quality processes. And yeah, that's a real issue if you don't have people in-house with the knowledge or coding capabilities to build out these checks. And of course, then we have the AI and machine learning. It's definitely changed a lot of things in the data quality area. And of course, we need then these coding capabilities to implement those.
Yeah, it's a problem across the industry, isn't it? Sourcing the right skills. It's changing all the time. Excellent, thank you. And maybe see the poll results, please, and let me ask you to comment on them, Alexandra. What would you say to that?
I'd say yes, this is pretty reflective of what we're seeing.
Okay.
Of course, yeah, reducing errors and cost. Money is going to be a big factor here within businesses. And of course, yeah, better decision making. So as Mahib said, the more data you have, you can then make more accurate decisions for the business. But of course, you need to make sure that this data is in a good state that can be worked with.
Yeah. Mahib Stewart, are you surprised that improving compliance isn't nearer the top of the list, or indeed at the top of the list?
I think improving compliance to what I think is a question. So is it compliance to the regulators? Is it compliance to internal standards? I think that would be, the interesting split there.
Right, yeah.
And I'm actually quite happy to see at least 40% thinking about it in a business opportunity context, because I thought they would be more skewed towards errors or compliance. And so seeing decision making as number 2 and business opportunities on the top 5 is quite promising.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get them there. Thank you, Alexandra. And staying with you, we'll go backwards a minute actually first before we go forwards. What types of approaches have been taken to improve data quality in the past, and where have they fallen short? You've mentioned manual processes. Are there other things people have been doing that just sort of didn't quite make it?
Yeah, so I think this does expand on my previous point. So a combination of factors relating to the manual data quality processes implemented for these large volumes of data it just can't be processed manually anymore, and the difficulties of then implementing a code-heavy operation. So yeah, the manual efforts in generating good quality data solely via SQL-based checks or using the everyday spreadsheet tooling just as feasible when volume of data is as large as what we're working with today. And the time involved in implementing these manual processes, and of course, the more risk of incidents of human error. So then too large of a percentage of the data being fed downstream just isn't meeting an appropriate standard of data quality. So then these areas of the business can't function effectively until they have this good quality data ready to use. And as I said before, these code intensive solutions run into similar problems. So finding people with the right skill sets to implement a data quality framework in Python or Java, it's difficult to find people who have these skill sets, especially if you want to implement the framework within an area of the business where you don't have quite technically skilled users. Okay. And then, both these approaches create these bottlenecks within the work stream as the good quality data isn't being fed into the business areas which actually analyze and create purpose out of this data. So it'll make it more difficult to make these decisions that affect the business. It's great you have all this data, but if it's not in a format that can be used, then you're not really getting any benefit out of that. So then, of course, if we have good quality data from these, from the framework being pushed down further to these business functions, you can find more meaningful insights, analytics, or meeting your regulatory compliance. So we need to make sure the data meets these standardizations, or even for complex matching activities. So with data migration or mergers or acquisitions, we need to make sure that your data maps up correctly.
Okay. Stuart, in your experience, what sort of efforts have you seen sort of push data quality forward, and why have they failed or not been super productive?
Yeah, I think failure is harsh. I think we kind of learn from failure in some respects as to what works and what doesn't. But yes, it's been, as Alexandra said, it's a combination of inadequate skill set or not the right skill set, legacy tooling or applications, and getting the right tooling for the job. And a lot of the tooling is reasonably recent, last few years, that can actually help do the job outside of the very manual processing that's gone before. And I think the other aspect is a standardized approach. So where things are done kind of piecemeal, they don't really join up. So to get a standardized approach across an organization, it just helps drive that same goal for everybody. But and sharing the skills across the organization then helps to drive that framework forwards, I think.
Presumably across a large organization such as yours, that's a difficult and relatively slow but hopefully productive process.
Yeah, it's not easy, but the focus is definitely there, and I think once you start on the journey and show the benefits, then it's definitely something that will progress at a faster pace, I think.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Stuart, staying with you in today's data environment, we've talked about the volume, the different kinds of data, obviously the quality. Why should organizations consider investing in something like a data quality control framework now?
I guess as we've already touched on, Mohib, certainly the increased focus from regulators means that the regulatory obligations of an institution are far more stringent, and they're not things you want to get wrong. No organization wants to suffer any kind of reputational damage, and bad customer experience is also high on the agenda. Bad quality data can lead to bad customer experiences. There's so much competition, the challenger banks, etc., that you want to be considered number one by your customer base. And I think there's just the need to demonstrate that you have control of your data, within an organization, being able to pinpoint where things are going wrong. And I think it's investment for the future. The data is just going to get bigger. And technologies are now coming along, the cloud-based, the more standardized approach. I think it's a really good time to start to embed these kind of processes. As technology moves on, we need to keep pace with the technology and make the best use of the technology that we can, and demonstrate that it can be done without too much of a problem, I think.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Mohib. What would you say there in terms of, why invest now?
Yeah, I mean, as Stuart has nicely summarized, like there's benefits on the compliance side, but also on the business side. I think often in these discussions, the even experts kind of go into this for examples for retail, but there are examples in finance as well. So if you take a mortgage credit scoring mechanism that relies on an algorithm, and you feed it incorrect data or poor quality data, it will make decisions that are not good for your customers, and then you would lose out on that customer. We have scraping tools that would pull out information about website activity for marketing departments, and that's quite useful for both buy and sell side firms. But that insight is only valuable if it's clean, if it's providing the data in a way that someone can aggregate that information and make sense of it. So I think like that's kind of like there are some like real examples of where it's benefiting beyond the compliance space and beyond like the usual cases.
Okay, that's great. Let's get to the key of this then. And Alexandra, coming to you, how can a framework be built? How can it be integrated with existing systems and sustained? We've talked about legacy. We haven't talked about them, but there's plenty of silos out there, data silos out there. How can we begin to look at how to build a framework which will help?
So I think initially it's about the business area who you're implementing the framework, actually understanding the importance and benefit of putting effort into implementing this. So as Mohib said, if it's website activity for marketing, it's that team understanding why it's beneficial to them to have the good quality data. So people actually accepting that there's problems with this data that they're using and are willing to then investigate where these problems lie, definitely play a part in the initial construction of these data quality checks within the framework. Then we'll likely promote, make it easier to build kind of an automated data quality solution within this framework to run these checks against their data. And then within, this process, you'll need the ability to analyze, resolve, and review these breakpoints or failing checks within your data. And you'll need to find a way of doing this which the business users are happy to adopt, or as you mentioned, something that can be easily integrated into their current tools. So this framework could be something you devise yourself or buy it off the shelf from different data quality vendors. And of course, then from these failing checks, rules that you're running against the data to make sure it conforms to your standards, these checks should all generate some form of metrics, which then again can be integrated to the current systems. So they could be consumed by dashboards, ticketing tools, or even processed by AI or ML solutions that have been built in-house. And then hopefully this will promote wider usage within the organization, and therefore another driver to continue with this data quality improvement, or possibly move this to other areas of the business as well, if you're seeing the improvements from one part of the organization. And again, a tool that's suitable for the business needs, something that users are happy to add to their everyday workload, is likely to be more successfully sustained. And that will then likely need to be a low code or no code solution. So that just reflects the fact that most business units implementing this data quality framework won't have their own coding team. For example, marketing they're analyzing this data. They have some Python experts in there to clean this up before they actually analyze it. And then, yeah, a few questions. Does the tool meet all the data quality requirements for your organization? Can it actually find these poor quality areas of your data? Can it execute the required checks against your data? So creating these specific business checks, regulatory compliance, cleaning up website activity data. And then, of course, once we have found where these breakpoints are, is it easy to fix is it easy to fix this bad data? And can the tool then dive deeper into this bad data? Can it dig deep into the cause of these failing data quality checks? And then hopefully, if you've ticked off all of these components, you'll have a data quality framework that can be sustained within the organization.
Okay, thank you. Coming to you, Stuart, as a practitioner, obviously everything that Alexandra says is true and correct. How would you do it? There are sometimes cultural issues. We own this data, don't come near me. Cultural issues, financial issues, data that you just don't know about. How would you go about building such a framework and integrating it?
It's very much along the lines of what Alexandra's just outlined, very, very thorough. I think the important thing is to have a defined set of standards as to what you're trying to achieve, what is good data quality, what are you classing as good, to then essentially take to stakeholders and say, this is what we're aiming for. And the tooling is really important. So is it going to do what you need it to do? Obviously, again, with legacy systems can be quite difficult. And it's also the governance around that. So have you got the governance in place to escalate problems, or have you got the governance to allow key decisions to be made? Who's making them? Where does that role and responsibility type aspects sit? I think are really key to actually implementing a framework. And in terms of the sustainability, that's definitely showing the benefit. So how can you show what the results are of your data quality framework in a way that you can articulate that to show we've implemented this has improved, whether it's charts or whether it's commentary. It needs that clear forum or meeting or gather of colleagues to say, this is how we've done it, this is what we've shown, and then that goes hand in hand with, we'll do that again for something else within the organization, and carry it forwards.
Okay, and so it sort of spreads bit by bit.
In a good way, yeah.
For sure. Okay, fine. Coming over to you, Mahib, what sort of technologies, tools, solutions, and kind of services are useful here? I think Alexandra touched on AI, NLP, machine learning, and so on. What do you see as useful here to help to improve the quality of data?
I think the no-code solutions that Alexandra touched on are quite key. I think one big challenge that organizations face in the past was that the IT team would develop the rules, and then the business team would tell the IT team to update the rule as and when they need the changes. And half the time they wouldn't understand what is the rule trying to do. So when you give the control to the team that's going to benefit the most from the rule, and they're able to change the rule without much help, that's a very powerful place to be, because then you have made the business team the owner of those rules. And touching to Stuart's point around governance, you're kind of creating those rules and responsibility that, okay, this is a rule that we are owning, and we're going to look at the exceptions of it, because some of these tools are able to produce more exceptions than anyone can handle. But then when you provide the ownership with it, then they are going to look at the exceptions coming out and kind of try and fix those things. The other aspects of the tooling kit is definitely the dashboarding part. I think it's quite key to have clear defined metrics, but also presented in a way that you're able to show value throughout your data quality journey. Often, at times what happens is that you would achieve something and then the next one is a big exercise. So then you're not able to show value throughout. So the tools around dashboarding are quite good now, that they're able to pull data at different intervals to show, okay, well, how is the quality throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, and so on, and showcase that. And then I think a lot of organizations go for in-house tools for exception management, which is basically the results that the rule produces, which is fine. But as long as the tools are able to provide you with an audit log, okay, what is happening to the issues raised, and they're able to showcase, okay, these are the high priority one, because that's another key part, that you will have more exceptions than you can manage. You need to be able to prioritize them. That is my high ones, and I want to fix them straight away. These are the ones that I can, wait for a bit longer. So it's a mix of like tooling spread across the whole framework in some ways.
Okay, thank you, Alexandra. As an expert here and somebody who's looking at these things every day, where do you see the best kinds of technology tools and solutions and services, and what sort of things are you concentrating on here?
Yeah, so I agree with what Mahib had said regarding tools which could be adapted to both coders or non-coders within the team. We're seeing mixed skill sets amongst our customers as well. So if you have a tool that can be adapted to both types of business users, you're more likely to get these data quality checks built and defined more effectively. So maybe the less technically skilled users aren't harassing IT every few hours to update the rules, or especially if they in the first place aren't fully aware of what this rule is checking. So hopefully, if you can give the ability to the business users to create and modify their own rules, that will help in rolling out an end-to-end data quality control framework a lot more quickly. And as well, yes, the exception management. So an easy to use issue resolution application is likely to be a lot more beneficial, as this allows these non-technical business users who are usually the subject matter experts are working with this data every day, and people who want this data to be good quality data. A tool, an issue resolution tool that allows these business users to see where the problems are and fix these breakpoints within their data, so they can avoid the bottlenecks they were experiencing from waiting on IT to update these rules, or if the data quality team is feeding this data downstream, it prevents a bottleneck there with poor data being fed in. And also, I think it depends on where the organization sits within its data quality journey. So you could kind of know how bad your data is, or exactly which part of the framework needs improving. So a data quality framework could be a pretty new investment for an organization. I think we've seen from First Poll, this is quite a minority of businesses out there, but it still exists for some organizations. So you might be aware, okay, we have a bit of a problem. It's affecting business functions downstream, but you don't know where to begin, or maybe you're not really familiar with the data quality area or processes. So in this case, you might want to invest in a tool that has more kind of automated profiling solutions. So especially this is useful for the business users that are fixing their own data. So they might not be aware of which parts of the data need analyzed for the breakpoints, or what to even check. So inconsistencies or outliers or invalid data. An automated profiling solution kind of hands that over to the business user and will likely produce some kind of easy to use, easy to view report where it shows these breakpoints or outliers. So it gives a bit more guidance in terms of what data quality checks you want to run against your data. Or you could already have some kind of process in place. Maybe it needs tweaked, improved. You need to add a bit more automation to your data quality checks, or maybe you have almost an end-to-end process, so you know where these breakpoints are in your data, but you don't actually know what is causing it. So kind of analyzing these insights from these data quality metrics, and so investing in AI or ML solution to do some kind of predictive analysis on these breakpoints might be more appropriate for your organization as well.
Okay, So we're really talking about sort of self-service data quality management where the business users are in charge to a degree.
Yeah, it seems that way. Have a mix. I think it depends on, as we said, the skills within the team, and maybe as well how quickly do we need this data cleanse. You need kind of experts to come in and build the initial framework. So it might be more organizations have more of a helping hand at the beginning, and then they can self-serve.
Okay, that's great. Let's take a break for some audience questions, and they do actually reflect some things we've actually been talking about. Which is right there, Alexandra, for you. It says, we are looking at using a data quality framework. How should we plan for it and where should we start? I think, Kurt, to sum up some of the things you said.
I think planning, I suppose, deciding on what part of the data you think is most crucial to be fixed, and then doing that initial data discovery. So figuring out what parts of the data you want to analyze. You might actually see that certain parts of the data aren't as bad as you initially thought they were. So I think it's good to have a good idea of where you want to start with this data quality framework.
Okay, thank you. I'll put this one to you, Steve. It's quite a difficult one, and if not, Alexandra may be able to pick it up or both give us that answer. It asks, how are the challenges on PII and GDPR being tackled in the context of DQ profiling? Obviously, these things have sort of been thrown at us over the past few years. How can that be managed in terms of DQ profiling?
I think these are identified as priority. So the data involved in these processes and outputs are classed as a priority. So they kind of come first in terms of the end-to-end journey of that data. So if you can identify all the data involved in these reports, then you can, as Alexandra has kind of alluded to, you can do the initial data discovery piece to understand if the data isn't good, why is it not good? And looking at the end-to-end journey, where does it stop being good? Is it so you can, it's key to identify the point at which that data fails to meet the requirements that are required for the report. So then focusing on that sort of for the remedial action. And I think key in that is the buy-in from the stakeholders, which is improving so much over the last couple of years as the importance of data becomes so much more of a priority than it is just making a focus on these reports that are highly regulatory and extremely important from a customer perspective.
Thank you. Alexandra, Datactics over time has done quite a lot of work around this and GDPR and so on. Is this something that you talk to clients a lot about, and how do you resolve it on the data quality side?
I suppose you could implement some form of data masking. So maybe the users that are analyzing this data aren't maybe seeing the sensitive information, or ensuring maybe you're siloing off some of this information to more restricted users, having some kind of initial filtering to the discovery process to make sure users can only see that specific area of data are able to see that. So there's a few different kind of means you can put in there to control that.
Okay, that's great. Mary, coming to you with a question. It says, we want to need to improve data quality, but we also have a lot of siloed systems and data. How can we build the kind of framework you're talking about? I guess the question is, can you build this kind of thing across siloed data and systems?
So I think one of the big parts of any data quality framework is the associated data governance. And data governance is kind of what breaks these silos. It is what brings people together. You have concept of governance forums or committees to practically do this, but the idea is to spread out your data across data owners and data stewards and make people champions of their data, and then bring them to a table and discuss data issues. And that's what we're going to be starting to question, okay, well, this data exists here, but it also exists in somewhere else. Why are we collecting this data twice? What other data do you have that I might need? And those type of questions is what's going to break those silos. Because what you'll end up with otherwise is that if you do a use case only, then you might do really well in one use case, but another use case might be completely ignored. So this is the part where the data quality and governance is kind of go hand in hand, which is key for breaking these chains.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And one very much for you, Stuart, as a practitioner. And it asks, do you think there's a place for data literacy strategy within a good data quality control framework? I think that's a question around culture, around spending, around bringing everybody together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly one of the key aspects to a good framework is education. So it's really important to communicate why is data quality so important? Why is the framework so important? Why is all this investment and work happening? And then you get buy-in from everyone within the organization. And the other key thing I think is to understand, or to let an organization's colleagues know that everybody's got a certain amount of responsibility towards good data quality, and they're all involved in contributing towards that. But the culture is very important, and I think that's what brings various colleagues from many different roles together to kind of get them on the same journey. And it ultimately leads to just a far greater sense of community around data. And it certainly helps things move faster, because, you know, people understand the goal that they're working towards and why they're doing it. And also demonstrates the importance of it. So yeah, I think that's really key and something we work very hard at.
Okay, that's great. Following on from that, Mohim, let me come back to you. And it asks, where is the real ROI in investing in a data quality control framework? Again, it's probably around not only the numbers, but the culture and the firm's development. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, so we've touched on a lot of the benefits, right? So one big one that people realized was the reduction of errors, the amount of time people spend on fixing things. So, and it could be something as simple as adjusting a report before it's sent out because it has some extra characters. Now, what happens with that type of issue is that you can't automate the process. And when you fix these issues, you can automate the processes and streamline it, and then be able to make some savings on that. We talked about regulatory compliance in detail, like since the financial crisis, the sell-side firms in particular have had massive investments in regulatory reporting and transaction reporting, largely due to the pressure from the regulator to get data in better quality. And then that's a return that you want to see, that, okay, you're not spending as much money on fixing transactions and so on. But to Stuart's point about, like, having that culture of data, when you've educated the team to understand their data, you've cataloged your data by the different governance roles, you've created a community of data, and that's going to have rewards for longer terms. You will have people who will start questioning the use of data. You might be getting data that you're not using and you should be using, or, well, you might look at your license agreements and change some of the data that you're getting. So I think that mindset is what's going to trigger a longer term return for the organization. And then obviously there'll be operational benefits along the way.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps we've got a few more, but one for you, Alexandra. It's a very practical one, this one. We need to prioritize certain data and set different thresholds across different data sets in terms of data quality. Can this be done?
Yes, definitely. I'd say that's probably one of the easier steps, part of the data quality control framework, because you're already aware of these data sets, what checks you want to apply. So it's just within the solution that carries out these checks, defining these weights somewhere.
Okay, So thank you to our audience for your questions, and thank you to our speakers for their answers. And coming back to my questions, Alexandra, we've talked a bit about the step-to-step guide to getting data quality control frameworks right. But from early decisions, you ran through this earlier. How do you know when you're successful?
Well, I suppose, yeah, the early decision would be, of course, deciding if the tool is fit for purpose. So can that be applied to your specific business needs? So yeah, as I touched on before, can you build these checks that are specific to the business area, and can this be easily integrated within your system? And then from running these checks, you want to gain metrics from this process that's recorded somewhere. And it's then from these numbers that I would say an organization can understand if their data quality control framework has been successful. So recording these data quality statistics over time allows the business to see if their data quality is improving or regressing, mainly just at a high level. If it's improving, then great. Of course, the framework in place is operating effectively. Failure points are being highlighted, and these failure points are actually being resolved within the organization. And then digging deeper into the parts of the business which then use this data, determine if they are functioning more fluidly and no longer suffering the consequences of poor data. I'd say it's definitely a good measurement of success. So the numbers are looking positive, but the organizations that are actually using this data are seeing the benefits as well. But even from these insights, even if the numbers look like they're going on a downwards trajectory, at least the organization is being presented with the evidence that they have a problem somewhere within their work stream, and they can then allocate the required resources to investigate this further into these specific failing data quality checks.
Thank you. Stuart, what would you add there? How would you identify and discuss success across a big bank?
I think it's important initially when you want to implement or set up a framework is to ask yourself the question, what does good look like? What is your ultimate aim going to be? And then it's what data are you wanting to look at? What is in scope? There is so much data to do it on every piece of data would just be an astronomical task. And then where do you want to measure the data quality? So data will go through a journey within any organization. So where is it important to measure that? And how are you going to measure it? Are you measuring the completeness of it, the validity of it? And a consistent approach just across the systems is really important, because it allows that to be rolled out from one business unit to another. You take the learnings and you're able to roll it out to another. And then leading on from that, it's identify all your stakeholders. So how many people will need to be involved in implementation of this framework? Because ultimately you will be asking these people to do work. So again, it's back to the culture and why are they being asked to do this? What is the benefit to them? What is the cost on them committing resource to implement a framework? They do need that kind of buy-in from it. And this is where it comes to, the seniors, that they can say, this is something that really benefits us. I'd like everyone to become involved. And then the roles and responsibilities is the next step for me. So you've got a X number amount of stakeholders. Everybody knows what their role within that piece of work is going to be. And then the measurement of success certainly comes down to the tooling and the outputs. How can you demonstrate, as Alexandra said, whether your data's improved or where it hasn't improved? And another element of success is where it hasn't improved, can you then go and take steps, remedial actions to improve it? So you can show, that journey of increased data quality. and being able to show that in a way that can be interpreted by anybody, I think quite simply is really a powerful thing to do.
Excellent, thank you. Segueing into our next and last poll, which asks, what extent of business and operational benefits are you gaining or do you expect to gain from implementing a data quality control framework? So while you consider what kind of benefits you would gain and what success would look like for you, let me come back to Stuart to talk about those wider business and operational benefits of a quality control framework. We've talked about the very direct ones, and you've talked towards culture. Talk a little bit more, if you could, about the sort of business operational side and operational side.
Again, going back to a point that Mohit made, if you have a good framework where you have good data quality, there are less errors that require workarounds. There's less resource committed to perhaps putting right things that have gone wrong. And where they have gone wrong, putting that remedial action in place means that you're not constantly repeating kind of a workaround or repeating exercises that will be ongoing unless you get that good framework in place. The better. Everybody wants to make a decision based on the data that they've got. So having that data right just means that the decisions that are going to be made moving on are going to be the most informed decisions, which again, outside of the organization, is delivering that customer experience and giving the customer the best that you can provide. Okay,
Mohit, what would you say there?
Yeah, I think we've touched on a lot of the points here, and I think I'll probably just share an initiative that a lot of organizations are going through, is what we call the user enablement journey, where your organizations are making business users more able to perform whatever they want to do with data through APIs and other kind of toolkits available for them. And that requires them to trust the data. So if you have a quantitative analyst, you don't want them to spend time working on figuring out, okay, where does data quality issues lie and cleaning that. They want to use the data and run their models and come up with insights. So your used resources are best used if you provide them with good data. And all these initiatives about new technologies can come to light if you give them good data.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see if we could the poll results and what our audience says in terms of what they're gaining. Mohit, would you like to comment on that? So mostly operational benefits.
Yeah, and I think that's expected because the pain points you are going to see straight away in operational benefits. I think missed business opportunities are harder to see, but the pain points where a spreadsheet fails or a process fails or breakpoints, as Alexander mentioned, will appear in these operational processes. So that's kind of expected.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for voting. And coming to our last item today, I'd like to ask all our speakers for some advice that they would give to practitioners working on or planning to work on a data quality control framework. Alexandra, let's start with you, if we may.
I think, first piece of advice, similar to what Stuart and Mohit were insinuating, is creating this data community, or these business users being champions of their own data. So you want to ensure the people within the business understand the need for the framework and how this benefits them as well as the organization. So then they will be likely more interested in learning how to use the tool effectively, maintaining its adoption, and possibly even finding improvements themselves to be made to the overall data quality framework. So effectively, buy-in from your business users. And this leads on to point 2. So investing in appropriate tool for the team using it. So I think we've all touched on this on the call. So what technological capabilities does the team have in order to build the data quality checks that are suitable for the business needs? How mature is the data quality within the team? Do you need to invest in a tool that focuses more on the initial data discovery, or simply something that schedules your pre-built data quality checks and simply just pushes the results for resolution? Or does priority then go towards the end of the data quality framework? So do you need to spend spend more money on a tool that focuses on AI or ML to analyze the failing data quality checks, something that can dig a bit deeper into the cause of those failure points. And lastly is basically related to digging deeper into these breaks. So actually understanding the root cause of the poor data quality. So recording these data quality metrics over time, analyzing where and when the failure points occur, and even visualizing these within your data lineage tool, for example. So then once you can visualize where these failure points are, it's easier to track these back. This could even be to some kind of automated process that's generating this data within the organization. This process could be constantly introducing these breaks or failure points, or from this from the insights of the metrics, can you see where these breaks are reoccurring? So yeah, definitely analyzing into the root cause of this poor data quality will definitely make it easier to fix that in the long run.
Okay, thank you. Stuart, what advice do you have for our audience?
I think from the very start, it would be just identify the scope. What data are you essentially trying to implement the framework on, and identifying all the stakeholders that will be involved in that journey, and get the agreement that that's the way that the business wants to go. That's the right thing to do, with the supporting governance. And then finally, definitely get the clear mechanism for showing your outputs. It's so important to demonstrate how well or where it can be improved, because that that's opens the door for it to continue, I think.
Okay, Mohib, some final words from you.
Yeah, I think I'll be repeating most of what Stuart and Alexandra have stated here. I think definitely start small. You don't want to choose a use case that's too difficult, because then you would not be able to get the buy-in needed. So well-defined small use case with clear business value that you can measure properly, and that you can show measurement throughout the journey of that use case, and then iterate over other use cases, the same model. And then don't forget about data governance. I think a lot of the programs go into data quality straight away, and then realize that, okay, well, we need someone to look at that issue or that result coming out of our rules. So it's key that these two things go hand in hand.
Okay, thank you, Mohib, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing their expertise and experience, and thank you to Daydactics for sponsoring, I should say. My apologies, today's webinar. So Daydactics, thank you. Before we close, just a few A-Team Group things you might like to sign up for. You can register for 2 forthcoming buy-side webinars, one on the time is now for buy-side firms to reevaluate their approach to data management, the other taking a holistic approach to buy-side data management. You can also download the 10th edition of our must-have regulatory data handbook. You don't want to read it, but it's a very useful book to have. That said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Alexandra, Stuart and Mohib, and thank you to all of you who've taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.